Hulkamania running wild. NWO for life. Hulk Hogan, flawed but immortal. This is Kent, and this is Fanatically Speaking. Let's go. Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to Fanatically Speaking. And let me tell you something about Hulk Hogan. This episode is all Hulk Hogan. Netflix just recently released a documentary on Hogan. I'm going to get into the documentary here and there. This episode is just really about just Hogan. Me as the wrestling fan, I want to go through the stages of Hogan, and which is really the 80s, the 90s, and then the rest of his career. And I did this, again, based on the documentary and just based off of, he did pass away last year, relatively young. I mean, 71 is not old and it's not young either, but it's also, there was some mystery to his death of, what caused it and the what led up to it and on things like that. But I just wanted to go through kind of like his life and his journey, because he was an important part of not just me, but many being a wrestling fan, and what kind of a figure he was in the 80s. And the 80s was a different time for all you young folks out there nowadays. You have no idea about the 80s and the figures that became popular and who was popular back then. But anyways, this episode is all about Hulk Hogan. And we start in the 80s where Hulkamania, all that great stuff started. But like I said, not a real, scene for scene or step by step with that documentary, but I'm going to hit it. The documentary left out a lot of stuff. I think it could have probably been more episodes. They could have got into some more detail, maybe got a little more, story behind what happened in certain things. And I think one of the big ones was not only when Hogan started or when he got popular, but I think for everybody here and myself, I was born in 1981. So the red and yellow Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania, that's what I remember. That's my, earliest memory of them. WrestleMania, and later, saw Rocky III. But, like the documentary didn't get into his time in Japan, where he was huge. No mention of the fact that he wrestled Andre the Giant before WrestleMania 3. He'd already body slammed him. But, at the time, it wasn't mainstream. So, Rocky III put him on the map for the world, even though Japan, America knew him, his territories, where he wrestled, and he was rising. But really, like I said, on the map, doing that role in Rocky III was big. Teaming up with Mr. T, at WrestleMania. WrestleMania and Hogan are synonymous together. They are the reason, both. Like Vince McMahon, again, he's his own other documentary and his own other, personality. But you have to give credit where credit's due. And Vince, with the idea of WrestleMania, and to, again, this, him going to get Hogan to be the guy at the time of the WWF, smart, and everything that worked out great, right? So WrestleMania, the biggest thing for wrestling. Hulk Hogan, the biggest thing for wrestling, and the reason that it's as huge and as big as it is today. It started before that, but the mainstream and the popularity and the entertainment and the celebrity, all that was then. So, teaming him up with Mr. T at WrestleMania was absolutely genius, because I mentioned the 80s were just built different. And two of the biggest stars of the 80s, no matter what they did, was Mr. T and Hulk Hogan. two of the greatest, if not the greatest, figures or stars of the 80s. And again, like I said, it was just built different. Hogan was everywhere, just like Mr. T. And it was just amazing that they got put together in wrestling. One a wrestler, one not a wrestler, but obviously built also in Rocky 3. So they both had cartoons. They both had all the merchandise, even like food. I always say this, like Mr. T cereal. I miss it. I wish they'd bring it back. It's one of the greatest cereals I've ever had in my life. And maybe it's just nostalgia. Maybe I just remember it being better than maybe it was. I don't know. I didn't make that mistake with Cookie Crisp, but as an adult, the TV shows, the movies, all that, they were the same. And, to put them together, like I said, that just got it started, and just catapulted Hogan even more. I mean, again, he was already a figure. He was already, wrestling fans, and then they had seen him in the movies. But then, he's teaming up with Mr. T, and they're showing up on talk shows, and they're doing all these things. Absolutely genius, right? Best of both worlds. They're together. Like I said, the rock and wrestling, and obviously one of the biggest things ever. And it's funny, I just went to a card toy trade show yesterday here locally, and I did not buy it, but it was the new version of the LJN figure of Hulk Hogan. Now I say this because, again, this is about Hogan. So Hogan was the first wrestling figure that my brother and I had. We had to, being brothers, we shared a lot of things like that when it came to toys. And the wrestlers that we got, the best Christmas we ever had, all the LJN wrestlers. But yeah, they had one at this show yesterday, and it was priced pretty good. I just said, I just passed on it because I just don't need it. I don't even know where to put it. I'm already collecting, Funkos and all these things. Though a part of me wish I would have got it. But that was the first one. And that helped, of course, me become a bigger fan of Hogan and wrestling. Because, again, that figure was just like, man, look at this wrestling figure. It's this big, the big rubber LJN wrestlers. And that's a memory of, of a toy that stays with me to this day. The first one that got us going. And then, of course, we went on to, get many more of those, and even the new figure, any figure that came out after that. But Hogan was the big one. That was the first one. So anyways, with that Hulk, with Hulkamania being born, this was the 80s, this was WrestleMania. And like I said, it was Hulkamania running wild, the Hulkamaniacs. It caught on. There was nothing like it at the time. I mean, crowds and fans, they went crazy for Hulk. The theme, coming out to Real American, which had already started back, like you said, if you go to the documentary, he was already, using the theme, but it got even bigger in WWF. And what always gets me about Hulk Hogan, and I mentioned this, I don't think I've ever mentioned this on episodes before, but we were gonna one time for a fun thing is like do the most famous like bald celebrities that people just don't care they're bald. They're just celebrities and they don't care they got a cul-de-sac or whatever. And this comes from someone who is battling with that. I of course am not popular by no means or stretch of the imagination. But Hulk Hogan, again, he was bald, receding hairline, but he had long blonde hair, and nobody cared. Nobody cared. I mean, dude was huge. All you saw was the handlebar mustache and the personality and the charisma. You didn't care about it. The let me tell you something, brother, is iconic. So when he got to that, promos with, Mean Gene Okerlund, they were legendary, classic. He had that intensity. He turned it on, snap of a finger. As soon as the light went on the camera, bam, he's on it. The 24-inch pythons. I mean, he was huge. And again, that red and yellow synonymous with Hogan. You see red and yellow, some people may think of Macho and Slim Jim. I don't know, but it's really Hulk Hogan. That red and yellow is the Hulkamania with Hulk Hogan. And as I mentioned, those promos, I've never seen someone go into character so quickly than him. He was the ultimate performer when the lights went on. Early in his career, definitely, in the 80s, and the more you see behind the scene footage, and a lot of the documentaries showed those, behind the scene footage of him at home with his family, with his kids, soon to be wife, and all these things. He just turned it on. Like when it was time to go, he was Hulk Hogan. And a lot of the stuff that I know and I've learned that the documentary didn't talk about, and a lot of wrestlers do this. I don't like to say they don't steal it, the gimmick, or you have your idols and you have your those who came before you look up to, so you mimic a lot of what they do. Not everybody's like this, but much of his gimmick, the Hulkamania, the Real American, the red and yellow, the blonde hair, the way he talked, the way he acted, everything about him was kind of borrowed from other wrestlers that he looked up to as he was getting into the business and as he was becoming popular, or before he was popular. There was a wrestler, Austin Idol, obviously Dusty Rhodes, superstar Billy Graham, Jesse Ventura. He definitely bit off from a lot of them to create this bigger than life, this larger than life personality and gimmick in Hulk Hogan. Many wrestlers, like I said, do it. Ric Flair, he did it. Even like now, you talk about like The Miz kind of went, a lot of The Rock, The Miz, The Rock. LA Knight's been, said he's a Stone Cold Rock impersonator. He does his own, kind of the way, his cadence of how he talks. And that's okay. I mean, they're not doing it exactly the same, but they bite off of their, those who they looked up to. I will say like a Stone Cold and The Rock were original. John Cena, original. So it's always good to be original, but, at the time, the good thing about Hogan was, again, there was that small community of wrestling fans. And again, it was all branched out in territory, so you didn't get to see, it all together and mainstream. So when he did go mainstream, then it was mainstream. One of those things I talked about, just mentioned earlier, was WrestleMania 3. Hogan and Andre. What made Hogan bigger was that WrestleMania 3. It is one of the greatest matches ever. And in wrestling, greatest matches don't always mean who does the best flips and moves, right? That is a way to become a great match, but what helps wrestling and matches a lot of times are just the storyline, the build up, and the anticipation of something that you think you would never see. And this is a part of, and I'll get to why Hogan is what he is in the wrestling world. So Hogan and Andre the Giant, this was built up. Andre had to turn heel to get this match going. And it was just huge because it was going to be the promise of a body slam, the must-see body slam. Could he or couldn't he do it? And as this match went on and everyone watching, obviously Hogan eventually did it. And, of course, most of the world had never seen this happen. As I mentioned before, it had happened. But this was big for Hogan. You can't even explain the fandom and the cheering and the I don't know how else to explain it when he body slammed Andre the Giant. And then, with the leg drop, and then that was it. And that was like that passing of the torch, even though Hogan was already huge. I mean, this just made him even, again, larger than life, that only Hulk Hogan could do the unthinkable and body slam Andre the Giant. So still in this time period, me personally, I got to witness Hulkamania, Hulk Hogan in person as a kid, which was a great moment in my life and a memory that I'll never forget as well. We got to sit front row. I don't know how my dad pulled it off, but he got front row seats at the Charlotte Coliseum. And it was just what they call a live event, house show, whatever. And Hogan, not even the champ, by the way, was the main event of this. And he ended up beating Big Boss Man by a count out as he handcuffed Boss Man to the ropes, and Boss Man was outside the outside the ring. But one of the biggest things I remember is, Hogan winning and being on my dad's shoulders. And, of course, again, Real American playing. It's blasting. Everybody going wild. And that closes the show. Again, I can't even, like I said, I'll never forget that. That was just, again, I'll never probably sit on the front row ever in my life again. Tickets obviously cost different now than they did back then. But that was a cool moment. I got to see a lot that day. But again, Hulkamania, got to see it right there up close, right in my face, to see one of the greatest, if not the greatest wrestler ever, do his thing. And then just as a kid, there's nothing better. And I think I left with a foam finger, the foam fingers #1 that said Hulk Rules and Hulkamania on the one side. And of course, back then in the 80s, that was a huge time. Randy Savage, Macho Man Randy Savage was the champion at the time. And right after this, of course, it's led to them wrestling for the title at WrestleMania. The Mega Powers, their tag team was a big storyline, and the breakup was too, and the involvement in Miss Elizabeth, again helping, build Hogan, how big he was in the 80s and wrestling. Later in the 80s, Hogan did some movies. Late 80s, early 90s, No Holds Barred it gets made fun of a lot. But at the time, when you're a kid and Hogan's on top of the world, you don't care how bad the movie is. And he's kind of that, again, he'd already done movies, but then now it's like mainstream and he's doing movies. And I know Piper did, movies, and Andre did movies, and it was something different about Hogan. We always feel like Hogan paved the way for The Rock and guys like that that became movie stars from wrestling. But he also did, Suburban Commando and The Nanny. And again, at the time, if you didn't know as a kid, you were just like, oh, that's Hogan and he's doing movies and this is great. The documentary did mention, some of the down parts of Hogan back then as he got famous, and as many famous people do. And I know you've probably heard about wrestlers and drugs and not just steroids, but he talked about his drug use and drinking and things like that, partying, which again, a lot of famous people do, a lot of celebrities do. It's not just centered on Hogan, but I think it was different, especially when you watch the documentary and then you look back now as an adult. He could do no wrong. He was, telling us to train and say our prayers and eat our vitamins and wearing the cross, and he's drinking raw eggs, and he's like a motivational speaker. And again, he's the ultimate baby face in wrestling, and he's the good guy, and the good guys always win. And you got good versus bad and evil or whatever in wrestling. He's against Andre or Iron Sheik or, the Big Boss Man and whoever the bad guy is. Hogan was the ultimate face, the ultimate baby. So as an adult, you look back and you're like, wow, like there's two sides. Obviously he is a person, and then he is Hulk Hogan. And like I said, he would turn it on and he had everybody hooked. I would argue, John Cena probably give him a run for being a baby face. But he was probably the biggest baby face I've ever seen in wrestling. And then again, outside of wrestling, he had spread into mainstream and other things. And again, he was just the biggest figure and the most likable and lovable. So to see that, on the personal side, he's out here, doing drugs and drinking and partying and crazy things. It's like the opposite of what he was preaching. And these drugs were one thing. And as I mentioned, this would be another topic in the 90s for him. So going into the 90s more, and going into the documentary with Hogan, you could tell that he wanted to be a family man, but he was just too famous. He was just too famous as Hulk Hogan. When you're that famous, you got to work every show. You got to be everywhere because you are the face of the WWF at the time. But you could just tell, like you said, he loved being a dad. He wanted to be home with his family, but like many celebrities, and you definitely see this with wrestling because up until not really recently, guys got to work like 300 days a year. And when you're the top guy, you just don't have the time to be home. It's like you're home for a day too, and then bam, you're gone again for however long, and then you can come back, and then you're traveling. So I think this is where Hogan's life got blurred between Hulk Hogan and his real name, Terry Bollea. This was that gray area of, is he Hulk or is he Terry? But he's having to be Hulk a lot more, and he's almost becoming Hulk Hogan. So at the time, it looked like, maybe his time was winding down. Like anything, and especially in wrestling, there's ups and downs. And with Hogan, it was no different. The same thing gets kind of stale, gets kind of boring. So they had made the decision to, basically pass the torch to the Ultimate Warrior, who was super popular. He had everything except promo skills and a lot of other things. Because outside of being the face of the WWF, it's not just in the ring. It's doing, whether it's commercials or whether it's interviews or, autograph signings and, visiting kids, and there's all kinds of stuff you got to do. So you got to be able to be more than just some sort of, crazed wrestler, which what Ultimate Warrior was. And again, as a kid, I loved it. He runs to the ring, he shakes the ropes, he's got the face paint. He's huge. He's got the muscles, and he's colorful. And again, sometimes weird interviews, weird promos, for sure, if you know the Ultimate Warrior. So they had that, tried to pass the torch where he beat Hogan. And I think that was something that was talked about in the doc, and I also heard it on Cornette's podcast. Jim Cornette's podcast was, he was almost cheered, or it almost felt, I don't know, like him losing and walking away was bigger than Ultimate Warrior winning. And that deemed to be true. Warrior just could not do it. And backstage, not that Hogan was loved, but I don't think Ultimate Warrior was liked or loved by many. And he had definitely some demons and issues he dealt with. And so did Hogan. But Hogan, on the other end, there's a couple things they also didn't do well. That didn't work out. They didn't capitalize when Hogan and Flair were in the company together. Ric Flair, who is also arguably one of the best, if not the best, right? I have different, I'm a WWE, WWF guy, so I'm always going to go with those guys over the WCW, NWA. And Flair's just not my guy. He's just not my, cup of tea or whatever. I would still go with like a Dusty Rhodes, a Sting, and, the Road Warriors over him. But they are, to many, many, many in the wrestling world and forever will be Hogan and Flair, top two, right? They were both in the company early in the 90s, and, they could have had the biggest match at WrestleMania ever, and they just never lined it up. They never got it to work. And I think there were a lot of different situations with that. And as I mentioned, that drug use in the 80s that no one knew about, until you see this documentary and you've heard interviews and things like that. Steroid allegations and use was definitely public, as there was, lawsuits and with Vince McMahon, the WWF, and Hogan was involved and about giving them steroids or, all kinds of things, right? And they had the company going in so many different directions with Hogan at times. They didn't know if, would he be there? Would he not be there? The image is hurt now, the Hulk Hogan image, because of steroids. So not only having him lose the Ultimate Warrior, but then you had to get it back. That didn't work, and they still was believing in him. So they said, hey, he had to win it back with Sergeant Slaughter. Then you got the Mania where he's against, Sid. The back and forth with the title with Taker. But like I said, it was kind of growing old, the early 90s. Now, again, as a kid, you don't really see all that. You're just like, Hulk Hogan, he's great. I love him. As an adult, you see it, and now you're like, oh, yeah, like he could have wrestled Flair. He could have, I remember, and all I cared about back then was, does Hogan win? Does Hogan win? Does he, does he Hulk up? And, does he, all that fun stuff that he did. But he was growing old, I think, within the, the WWE, WWF and the, like I said, the steroids, the trial, the documentary talked about him going on Arsenio Hall. And, he lied about taking steroids. And then he had to show up in court. And he had to show up in court to basically help Vince McMahon not go to jail, where he had to admit to using steroids and that Vince did not, was not giving him steroids. So, again, the 80s, everything he had built, the Hulk Hogan we were used to seeing, the huge, strong, blonde Hogan, things, everything we got accustomed to, after the steroid allegations, after the break, in and out kind of with the WWF, he did come back, and he was kind of skinny. He had like dark eyebrows. The one time he's sporting a black eye. There's a lot of controversy around when he made that comeback. And the biggest one was, now they were trying to make Bret Hart the guy. Now he was the guy. Safe bet, he built himself up now in the singles competition, and everything led up to WrestleMania 9. And as big as Bret Hart ended up being, or was, even at the time, he never was on Hulk Hogan level. He put the glasses on the kids, but still never Hogan level. He did have it, best there is, best there was, best there ever will be, but that was no Hulkamaniacs and let me tell you something, brother, and 24-inch pythons and the ear, the hand to the ear, listening to the crowd, the flexing in the ring. Nothing was like that. Okay, so, but yeah, the WrestleMania 9 ending, Yokozuna beats Bret Hart, and then Hogan, even after having a tag match with Brutus Beefcake earlier, comes out, and Bret Hart, they have Bret Hart tell Hogan, go, 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 go. I just got beat, but you go fight for the title. It was weird, but again, at the time you didn't care because it was like Hogan still was bigger than Bret. So Hogan going impromptu title match and he wins, And look, Bret Hart could wrestle. He could, obviously he had all the moves, the dungeon with his dad, Stu Hart, and but you hear him in the documentary. He's always salty about a lot of things, and as big a star as he was, I know that he wishes he could be as big as Hulk Hogan was. And again, Hogan, though, backstage, he played politics. He had the ego. It got the best of him. And I think he admits that. And again, when you're the guy and you think you know that you're better, or you know that you're better, and that's kind of what happened at WrestleMania 9. He kind of used his power to say, hey, I should be champ, not Bret Hart, or whatever the case may be. And you heard a lot about this. You have a lot, there's a lot about this with Hogan. You heard a lot in the WWF, but a lot in WCW, and I'll get to that. But putting the title on him, it just didn't work. They just couldn't come to an agreement. I think him and Vince, they were butting heads. He wanted to be, I think he thought still now they were back to thinking he was done. So he left WWF. He had his Thunder in Paradise TV show, and, he thought he was done with wrestling. And all of a sudden, Hulk Hogan shows up on WCW. And, this is like a new era, but this is still the 90s. This was the 90s, and Hogan in WCW as Hulk Hogan with Hulkamania and all that. Now he's with Jimmy Hart. It never was like it was in WWF. They basically were just trying to do the same thing. They were trying to repeat the same thing that he had done in WWF in WCW. Even matches with Ric Flair, they fell flat. They tried to bring in Mr. T again and all this stuff, and it just felt really, really old. So as stale as it got in WWF, it started out that way in WCW. Now, again, they were swinging for the fences and throwing money at, Savage and Hogan and whoever they could get from WWF. And at the time, old for wrestlers was about like 40 or early 40s. Like that was like, you're done. Kind of like athletes now. You used to be like, yeah, you retire at 35, early, mid 30s. Now, you got Tom Brady, LeBron James. You got guys playing in their 40s. That used to be unheard of if it wasn't like a Nolan Ryan, or certain guys could do it, but perform at a high level. And then, he did win the title, off of Flair at Bash at the Beach '94, and that's key. Bash at the Beach. But WCW product, it wasn't that bad. But I think both WWF and WCW were struggling, after Hogan, which again, why Hogan was so big, because once he left, it wasn't the same. They did the Bret Hart, they had Yoko, and then they were building Shawn Michaels, and they had these gimmicky characters, but, Hogan made WCW goofy like, WWF. You had the just goofy storylines, and like I said, he was trying to do the same or recreate his days, and Hogan just wasn't hitting the same, and it needed a change, and good for him, and good for Eric Bischoff and everyone involved in making that decision to say, you know what, it's time for a change. And ultimately, he turned heel. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, formerly Diesel, and Razor Ramon from WWF, coming in WCW, and it was kind of like blurring the lines of, what's real, what's not. They came through the crowd, and they were like invading, and so they, had the NWO, and that was formed when Hulk Hogan turned heel. And again, he was still a top babyface, and had always been a babyface in mainstream. So you got to think, over 10 years, mainstreaming as Hulk Hogan, top babyface, could do no wrong. And out of nowhere, at Bash at the Beach, 96, he turned heel, joined Hall and Nash, the Outsiders, to form the NWO, the New World Order. One of the biggest moments in wrestling, I go back to, again, biggest moments in wrestling, WrestleMania 3, all involved Hulk Hogan. This changed wrestling again. Fans, as big as and loud as they had ever cheered Hulk Hogan, this time they were angry and mad. Throwing stuff in the ring, and they hit Mean Gene, and he's like bleeding, and it was a wild scene because this was unthinkable, unheard of. You would never in a million years would you think Hulk Hogan would turn heel. But this was the changing in wrestling of, heel and babyface, where you kind of would get the edgier wrestlers where you couldn't tell. Now, at the time, this was like full heel. People were pissed. People were pissed at this. So he went from the red and yellow to the white and black gear. He switched from Hulk Hogan to Hollywood Hogan. He still had the blonde mustache, still had the bandana, but now he had the black scruffy beard. With the blonde handlebar mustache still going with the black beard, scruffy beard. And like Hulkamania, nothing was better than NWO. Nothing was bigger than the NWO in WCW at that time, because again, those blurred lines of what was real, what was not. Hogan now, he went on to have feuds with Sting, Goldberg, Piper, Flair, DDP. And as big as he was, there's also that downfall, that downside of Hogan. Even as Hollywood Hogan, now that he had become huge again, the top guy in the business again, this time as a heel, which I don't know if heels had ever been the top guy in wrestling, right? Not like this. And, some bad spots was, they had this huge buildup with Sting and, not paying off with Sting winning clean as the top baby face, the Crow Sting. Hogan had changed his mind earlier in the day on the finish. It kind of was messed up. It was botched count by Nick Patrick, and they had to restart the match, and then Sting won, and it was a lot of confusion. They brought in Ultimate Warrior. That didn't work. Definitely more harm to Ultimate Warrior than Hogan. But, he also had creative control in WCW. So again, big as he was flawed because that ego, that politicking backstage, having creative control, being the biggest star in wrestling, it just hurt himself and it hurt WCW. He did take wrestling more mainstream, even more. And that's something you can always say with Hogan, like partnering up with what's hot at the time, what could work in wrestling, like the Mr. T stuff. And now he's teaming up with Dennis Rodman, the bad boy Dennis Rodman. I mean, dyeing his hair and, Carmen Electra and whatever Dennis Rodman was doing, right? Taking his jersey off, throwing it, the tattoos. It was like this was the changing of maybe like culture, not just wrestling, but in general. This mid to late 90s. And again, Rodman playing with the Bulls now. Multi-time champion. It was a perfect fit with the NWO, especially as a celebrity. And he's an athlete. So it's like, hey, this guy could at least perform in the ring, right? And then again, with the bringing in Karl Malone, even Jay Leno, even though that part, they involved DDP. And even though he was older, acting cool and edgy, it was working. Nobody cared. I mean, it was, there was times where you're like, why does Hogan have baggy jeans on? Why is he talking like that? He's old. And you could tell Hogan's starting to look older, right? I mean, way different than the skinny, dark eyebrow Hogan. You could tell. And again, he held his own, but it didn't matter because, again, he was a heel. So he cheated to win. He did a lot of things like that. But again, this worked though. As big, like I said, he was huge. NWO was huge, and this helped the WCW. Monday Nitro beat WWF and Monday Night Raw for 83 weeks. They beat them in ratings. They were killing them. So eventually, though, NWO got old and they kept growing in members and storylines got stupid. And I always say, though, with Hulk Hogan, and Hollywood Hogan, whatever. As much good as Hogan did for wrestling, he did also hurt it. But I don't know if that's that longevity or if you're in it enough. Everything's not going to work. Especially in WCW, the finger poke of doom of him winning the title from Kevin Nash with a finger poke was about the dumbest thing ever. We go back to that Sting finish at Starrcade. And then if you don't know about the Bash at the Beach 2000 chaos with Vince Russo, Jeff Jarrett, Eric Bischoff, Booker T, just go look it up. I mean, the sketchy title changes, WrestleMania 9, finger poke of doom, Bash at the Beach 2000, even though that was reversed, but literally, Jeff Jarrett just laying down and Hogan pinning him. It's just bad for wrestling when stuff like that happens. And, for him to be a part of some of that goes back to that creative control and not knowing when to say when and say, I don't know about that. I will say that helped. WCW were killing themselves, but Hogan had a part in it with some of those events, some of those finishes. But again, there's still no argument that Hogan now 2 different iconic runs as a wrestler, as Hulk Hogan with the Hulkamania and Hollywood Hogan and the NWO. And not to mention, again, perfect themes for him as that the baby face with Real American and as the heel, whether he was coming out to the NWO theme or Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix. That stuff hit. And like I said, 2 different runs as a wrestler in 2 different companies and led them both to #1 status. No other has done that. No other has that effect. Some have come close, not to this level. But again, he made wrestling cool and popular twice. And although, as we say, all good things, though, sometimes must come to an end. So we get into the 2000s and to the end of of Hogan's career, life, all that. WCW went out of business. Sketchy sale to Vince McMahon. So what would be next? Hogan, of course, was under contract, and so he just waited out as he sat at home. And I get, like you say, you never say never in wrestling, and all of a sudden the NWO was back in the WWE. There's a few things we never thought we'd see, right? Is Hogan back in WWE, and definitely the NWO, which was, that was a WCW product. So we got that. We got that with Hall and Nash and Hogan. They came back, and it was, I think in the beginning, it was big. That's a big moment. It was kind of past its, NWO had kind of worn off, but now I guess it was supposed to be different because it was in WWE. I think it was still WWF maybe at the time, but either way, same thing. So during this comeback, this led us to, again, one of the greatest matches ever. And again, who's involved is Hulk Hogan. WrestleMania 18 with The Rock, Icon versus Icon, dream match. And there's only so many times in wrestling you get a dream match. And when I mention those who I have on my Mount Rushmore, my goats of wrestling, it goes to, I don't care that you wrestled for 25, 30 years or you wrestled for, 10 or 5 or 8 or whatever the case may be. There's a lot that goes into it. But again, here we find, Hogan in one of the greatest matches ever. It's hard to describe it. He goes in as a heel. Rock is the baby face, and if not the most popular wrestler at the time, along with Stone Cold Steve Austin. But nostalgia set in Toronto because Hogan was back. Not only was he back at WrestleMania. And it had been so long since he'd been in, WWE that this was a big moment for fans. And I don't know if this was because we talk about Mania crowds now. This might have been the first time a Mania crowd like took over and not sabotaged the event, but kind of said, "Hey, we're not going to cheer for this guy or boo this guy. We're going to do whatever we want." So there's a lot of mixed reactions in this match. But again, you got two of the best. They kind of flipped the switch. Hogan and Rock, I think they both claimed that, they kind of had to go off script here because they were cheering Hogan so loud. And Rock was kind of having to be, he was edgy anyways as a babyface like Stone Cold. So he could take he could take it if he was getting booed because he could give it right back and he could talk junk or whatever he needed to do. And he had been heel, so it's not a big deal if he's going kind of blurring the lines a little. But again, one of the greatest matches ever, if not ever. I think I said you put that with Hogan Andre because I think of Mania when I think about these moments. And Hogan's a part of both of them here. Or again, a part of it. So, and based off of that, and The Rock did defeat Hogan. So, of all the talk of Hogan not putting people over and playing politics and the finishes and inserting himself, at least here he had the knowledge and awareness to say, yeah, The Rock needs to beat me. He is the younger. He is the younger wrestler and the better wrestler, and at the time more popular and up and coming. Like Hogan's time, still at this point is coming to an end eventually. But he would go back to the red and yellow after this. There was no other way to do it. Vince, I think, had it like, hey man, go get your red and yellow. We're going back. We're getting rid of this NWO stuff. You're going back to Hulkamania, and we're gonna milk this one more time. And funny in the documentary how they, kind of threw a shot. Triple H threw a shot saying Vince told him, or that he told Vince that WrestleMania 18 was a nostalgia act and it would die down soon and not last. This kind of was the case. It was cool, though, to see him back. And it was cool to see him back in the red and yellow. And just again, because you never thought you'd see it again. And of course, Vince McMahon, being the money maker that he is, comes back and, he has a match with Hogan at WrestleMania 19. And so Hogan, they get to have it out and get his revenge on Vince. And that was kind of cool. And again, his wrestling career taking a turn, though, because these are one of those ideas. And you always wonder, like, why would Vince do things like this? Was it somehow to embarrass or punish Hogan for something? But, Hogan as the Mr. America character where he had a mask on and red, white, and blue. And, I mean, again, it's Hogan. The mouth is open. He's got the mustache. I mean, like, it's one of the dumbest things I think I've ever seen. But, again, blame that one on Vince. It reminds me of Kurt Angle's last match where he had to wrestle Baron Corbin. And even when he was, when he made his comeback to the WWE, Kurt Angle, and he had a storyline of Jason Jordan being his illegitimate son, I'm like, what are we doing with Kurt Angle? I think Kurt Angle is one of the most underrated wrestlers ever and was one of the greatest wrestlers, from the late 90s and 2000s until he left for TNA. And but anyways, I'm just like, I don't blame Hulk for being kind of upset with what exactly creative was doing with him as Mr. America, but he would leave the WWE. And during some of this time, he was doing his reality show, Hogan Knows Best, and I was on it. I watched that stuff, because it was entertaining in the height of reality television. You had the Osbournes and Real World and whatever else was going on at the time. And so Hogan Knows Best. That was cool. You got to see his family, his Linda's wife, his son Nick, and daughter Brooke. And she's trying to be a singer. And I think she had one hit song maybe. But he did, like I said, make his comeback again. They figured it out. And during all this run as Hulk Hogan, one more Hulkamania run, some matches with Undertaker, Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle, Triple H. uh, Shawn Michaels, and I laugh at that one because that might be one of the. We get back to the politicking Hulk Hogan apparently. Randy Orton, which Orton was his last match in WWE. They had a little storyline going about Brooke and Randy, but yeah, the HBK Shawn Michaels overselling in that match because apparently they had planned like 3 matches and Hogan wanted to win them all. I don't know why. Weird. It's like I said, weird times when he chose to lose and not lose. Again, I don't exactly understand everything there. Shawn Michaels was pissed, and I think he thought, hey, we're both legends. Shawn Michaels at the time was definitely having his second life, his second career, and yeah, every move Hogan did. If you go watch the match, and Shawn Michaels would, he'd get punched and just jump all over the ring, or fall out of the ring, or fly over the ropes, and just making Hogan look like, oh my God, you're just so powerful and strong. So during this time as well, we almost got Hogan and Cena. That's the rumor at WrestleMania 25, but that fell through. But that would have been iconic, and you would just put it down as a dream match, is one of the dream matches we never got. But you can only imagine at that time, just to have it. I mean, again, it's kind of like Austin on his match with Kevin Owens. Not a dream match, but just to see Austin back in the ring. But again, just to see Hogan Cena would have been huge. So personal things got in the way for Hogan. That's that downside of Hogan. He apparently, cheated on Linda, cheated on his wife, got busted. And you could see some of the arguing on the TV show, but again, it's the TV show. You don't know. Again, reality TV is not real. Or is it? We don't know. But it is scripted. So he ended up in TNA, and it was less than forgettable. But he did mention in the doc about he needed money. The divorce had drained him, and he was down and out. And Eric Bischoff come through and got him a deal with TNA, and that didn't exactly, them in TNA didn't exactly give us a good product. We got the Brooke and Bully Ray storyline, the Jeff Hardy Immortal group stable coming to mind, but this was like a low point for Hogan's career. I mean, I think they expected him to wrestle. But then he was just so banged up having surgeries that he never really did. And when he did, I mean, again, like Hogan in jeans, not exactly Hogan. It's like your athlete at the end of their career and they're playing for a team and you're like, they're not the same. Like, put whatever athlete on a team that was so random and they're just trying to hang on. You don't want to see Hulk Hogan in jeans wrestling with knee pads over his jeans. That's not a good look. That's not even Hollywood. That's not Hulk. But other things Hogan did, in these, later in his career here was, opened up the Hulk Hogan wrestling shop, beach shop, whatever you want to call it. In Clearwater, Florida in 2012, and he got one in Orlando in 2017, and then more recently in Pigeon Forge in 2025. He would have WrestleMania moment with Austin and The Rock at WrestleMania 30. So just cool to see all 3 of them in the ring. He was the host, but even here, he accidentally called, the Superdome, the Silver Dome. So that was that. But yeah, he has definitely some down. Then he had like that dark area. The divorce was one thing that had him down and out, and then he was TNA and made his comeback to WWE, kind of as a figure and just to promote things and open things and host. But had his cheating. Then he had his sex tape. And then he had his transcript, those got leaked. So his racial his racial talk got leaked, and he would lie in interviews, which I think there's a blurred line of, was it him being Hulk Hogan, or would he just tell lies? Like, that's always been something that baffles me. He would just say the most outlandish things, but was he in character sometimes, I think, and I think sometimes he just really, really misremembered things, embellished the truth for his own, build up his own brand. The documentary I go back to, it left out a lot of details about the racist remarks and, who the tape was with and everything around it. The media group Gawker, they released the tape without his permission. It was Hogan and the wife of radio host Bubba the Love Sponge. Ultimately, Hogan, though, did sue and got paid millions for invasion of privacy by Gawker. In the tape, though, the biggest thing is not just the sex tape, and that is a big deal. But of course, if you know the 2000s, that from Paris Hilton to Kim Kardashian to whatever celebrity, apparently that became a thing. Pam and Tommy Lee, these were things, right? Celebrity sex tapes. They were taping each other, and then somehow it gets out. So in the tape, though, he used the N-word repeatedly in the tape. He talked about his daughter, if she were to date a black guy, and he even said he was racist to a point in the, so it was not a good look. It definitely hurt his image more than anything ever had. This was the big one. You got to know the country and the temperature and everything at the time. So not a good look. He got fired from WWE, lost sponsorships, merchandise got pulled from stores online. So the period, this period of, one last run in wrestling to divorce, drugs, scandal, this was his low point. And the fall from Rise seemed not real again due to the Hulk Immortal persona of decades of good vibes and positive messaging. And, it goes back and, that blurred line between who's Hulk and who's Terry Bollea. And, was it all a lie? Did he use others for his own gain? Was the lies to, again, boost him? Or, like I said, was he just out for Hogan? And there's a lot of that talked about. There's a lot of that, people say now. He did ultimately regain popularity. WWE did hire him back. He became the host of Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia. So money comes into play of why they hired him back. I think Tom, you don't ever forget transgressions of people and things they did, but ultimately forgiveness is a thing. But I think money come into play here. They hired him back, and if you don't know the WWE by now, they do whatever Saudi Arabia wants. They take that money any day of the week, and ultimately everybody kneels in the wrestling business. Maybe not just wrestling business too, to that Saudi money. Hogan, he apologized repeatedly for the comments. Some accepted it, some didn't. Vince, not if that's the best guy to come to your defense, but he did come out and say that Hogan wasn't a racist, but he did say some racist things. But again, Vince, not the best person to have your back. He has his own legal issues. But again, like a lot of many famous people. So I mentioned Hogan, he misremembers a lot. His memory of timelines and how things happen don't always add up. And there's so many, in the documentary. And, it's funny. And in all his interviews, he had he had a few comebacks, in WWE. He was in and out, in his career, in his life. as he got older. We got to see him again. Those blurred lines. We got to see him though. Be a dad when he, Nick, I think, got a DUI or something, his son, and he came and he was super nice, and he was just trying to, again, you got to see that where he wasn't turning on the Hulk Hogan. Now he had to tell him like, hey, I'm Hulk Hogan, and what can I do? But his last appearance though in WWE, people, I don't think you can forget, and I don't know if it was just they were thinking back to the past controversies, or that he had endorsed, President Trump in the last election. But it did not go well. It was the Netflix debut on Raw and WWE, and they booed him out of the arena. It was the most booing that you could do. It was like uncomfortable booing for, as I said, a legend. Like, Hogan's a legend. No matter what you think about it, he's a legend, right? In the business, in the country, as an image, all these things, bad and all. And they boot him out of the arena. And again, Triple H, here he comes again. I found this again funny that, he admitted that he knew it wouldn't go over well because they're in Los Angeles. And they sent him out there anyways. He's promoting his Real American Beer, and then it just, Jimmy Hart's waving the flag, and it just did not go well at all. So again, Hogan, I'll say this, and this is what I say about the controversy and stuff, and everything about Hogan, by the way. Not in his defense, but I'm just talking about in celebrities in general. And how everybody, including myself, do with celebrities. No matter what they do, again, is it the person? Is it the character? Is it the performer? Right? Michael Jackson right now, Michael, the biopic, is one of the top grossing movies in the world. Not just in the country, in the world, but in the country too. Right? And like I said, people like myself, I still, every once in a while you get in that mood for some Michael Jackson music, right? Jackson 5, whatever it is. And he's accused of some very disturbing things. Okay? So that's why I go back to Hulk Hogan and those who, want to disown him forever. And you can do that. And that's cool. And I'm not defending him. I'm just saying that, again, if you don't know Michael Jackson's story, there's a lot of people going to see that movie. And I don't know, I haven't seen it, but I don't know if the movie touches on everything. You know what I mean? So, R. Kelly, same category, but his music is timeless. You'd be lying if you say you don't listen to R. Kelly. And he was obviously very controversial. Right? Both these guys, Michael, R. Kelly, they did some dirty stuff. R. Kelly for sure. There's like proof. Then we go to Diddy, top of the world of hip hop. And we learned a lot from his documentary. There's a lot of accusations, Diddy parties, right? Look at presidents who have been elected. People would defend them, even though their morals and past aren't the cleanest. And you can go through these presidents, John F. Kennedy, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Joe Biden. They all got stuff. All these politicians do, right? Athletes who are the best in their sport are not the best people or have the best morals. And people still cheer for them. And the list goes on and on. You can bring up Elvis, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Bill Cosby. Some flaws are worse than others. Some of the things these guys have done are way worse than others, right? Some is just small. It's just morals, and it's just like, but you still cheer for them. You still buy their shoes. You still watch them, right? I mean, it's no different. Hulk Hogan is no different than any of these, okay? And since I'm talking about Hulk Hogan, I had to bring this up because, we still cheer for them, including myself. We still watch their movies, listen to their music, go to their shows. Like I said, I'm a fan. I'm just like all fans of all these guys. You overlook their personal flaws, even morals, crimes, to still support them in their whatever, wrestling, sports, movies, music. He was no different. Hogan was no different than any of them. I'd like to believe him. And I know I talk about, he stretched the truth a lot, but I like to believe him that he was saved during his later years or rededicated, however you want to slice it. Became a Christian, not just saying it, but living it. I want to believe that for him, for his sake, right? And I say this, he is the GOAT of wrestlers in my book. Again, I was born in 81. I was born into Hulkamania because by the time I could remember and by the time I could know what I liked in wrestling, Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania was it. And again, wrestling would not be where it is today without Hulk Hogan. Him, Vince, WrestleMania changed the game forever. I said, he's on my Mount Rushmore of wrestling. And again, I'm a WWF, WWE guy. And I go by who puts butts in seats, who is popular, who carries the company. And that's Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and John Cena. Any of those guys, right? Now, obviously, I said Hogan got booed out of the arena, but that's for different reasons, different time, different place, right? John Cena's been booed out of arenas. And he kept going, right? But those three right now, they're obviously, they're still around. So anytime they show up, man, fans go crazy. I mean, I don't care. The Rock's he's a wrestler. I mean, he's a movie star, but he's still a wrestler. He's still one of the greatest, if not, right? He's up there. Hogan to me is the greatest. Again, I mentioned those matches that he had that are iconic. Those moments that are iconic. 2 different companies, 2 different gimmicks, right? Just the biggest ever. Nobody's done that. Right? All had the fans, all 4 of those guys, they had the fans, the following, the merchandise. They put butts in seats. They made the company money. They made money. And all went to other platforms and still a star. Any TV show, movie, talk show, SNL, reality show, host, it doesn't matter what they do it all. Hogan changed the wrestling game twice, but again, seemed to never know how to let it go of that Hulk Hogan persona. And you see that in the documentary, right? It's still like he can turn it on and off like no other. He's a real showman and performer. But Hulk Hogan and Terry Bollea, it was blurred lines on who was talking at times. Maybe in the good times he was Hulk, and the bad times he was Terry. We'd like to think that, right? Again, Hogan died last year at 71 due to complications from a surgery. Official cause was a heart attack. A part of my childhood, my adulthood, and life had died. Again, Hulk Hogan, he was flawed, but he was immortal. That's the episode for today. It was all Hulk Hogan based, going through the life, the ups, the downs of Hogan. Wanted to release it again because of the Netflix documentary. But again, that's the episode for today. Listen to the show on all podcast outlets, even YouTube, just no video. Follow on social media, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Keep up when episodes are available, the topics. Stay connected to the show. Listen, share, like, follow, comment, download, all that fun stuff. But especially listen and share. Remember, whatever device you listen to, just go and tap that app. And for this episode and that, I am